Back on the Morgan Streetman Show, one of the great things for Pat and I should say, is we get the full Morgan Streetman Show because we get all of your show prep that you put so much work into. And then if you don't get to something during the show, we can still read it. And one of those items last week, Morgan, that really piqued my interest that you didn't get a chance to get to was the explanation behind the supply chain issues.
Yeah, and we are going to get to that. Apparently, this is all, by the way, just a joke to our president, your president, because, you know, I heard it. We had a clip a couple of weeks ago. I heard this when he said this. We talked about it. I got to play it again. It's not just for the fact that he slurs his words, and he sort of takes 3 or 4 words and makes them into one word like jever. Instead of did you ever, he says jever. But I want you to hear this because it'll give you a little mindset, a little clue into his mindset, and then we're going to hear him explain the supply chain to us, and then we're going to tell you what's actually going on with the supply chain. But listen to your president here.
Do you ever think you'd be paying this much for a gallon of gas?
A gallon of gas? Do you ever think you'd be paying this much for a gallon of gas? So apparently it's all kind of like a joke to him. I mean, after all, do you think that he ever pays for a gallon of gas? Do you think he ever pays anything for all those flights back and forth to his home in Delaware, all of his 20-car motorcades driving him around D.C. and other places? You think he pays a dime of rent at the White House? You think he knows anything about your life or my life and how we have to live our lives? You think he covers the power bill or pays for his staff? No, that's all left to us dolts. That's all left to our pocketbooks, the American taxpayers. We pay for all that for him so that he can go around and tell us what things mean. And his eloquence is amazing, isn't it? I mean, we can count on him to explain complex issues, if nothing else. If nothing else, we count on him to explain complex issues in language that even a mentally challenged child can understand, right? I mean, that's your president right there. So the next clip that we have from your president is one where he explains the supply chain issues, and I know you're going to be on the edge of your seat for this clip. Just listen. I mean, he brings so much truth and light to your mind with his words. You're going to love it. Let's hear it.
Why is the price of agricultural products, when I go to the store, why is it higher? What, like, for example, if we were all going out and having lunch together and I said, let's ask whoever's in the next table, no matter what restaurant we're in, have them explain the supply chain to us. Think they'd understand what we're talking about? They're smart people. But supply chain. Well, why is everything backed up? Well, it's backed up because the people who supply the materials that end up being on our kitchen table or in our life, guess what? They're closed those plants because they have COVID. They're not. So it's a complicated world that people are facing. We've never faced anything like this before.
Okay, so the explanation is it's all because of COVID, right? I mean, what else could they – that's the explanation for everything now. It's all because of COVID. It's too complicated for you to understand the supply chain issues. I mean, even if you're a smart person – and by the way, I feel like my IQ just went up about 10 points listening to him. But even if you're a smart person to begin with, you can't be possibly expected to understand the supply chain. Well, actually, it's pretty straightforward what's going on with the supply chain. First, we've switched to this just-in-time delivery supply chain, whereas stores used to hold product in the back. They actually had an on-site warehouse like grocery stores and other types of retail establishments. That's all gone away. Now the product you see on the shelf is pretty much, or maybe nowadays you don't see on the shelf, but the product you see on the shelf is pretty much all they've got, and they've got a very tight system that's got a lot of computers involved where it's just-in-time delivery. Well, what happened in California on October 16th, 2020 to affect this? Because, you know, the two biggest ports in our country for goods coming into the country are the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach in California. That's where all those Chinese goods come in. They come in on container ships. Those containers are offloaded. And until recently, those ports didn't operate 24/7, but that's not the problem. And that's been blamed as the problem by a number of people, but it's actually not the problem. The problem that has arisen is that about a year ago, October 16, 2020, the Environmental Protection Agency reached a settlement with the California Air Resources Board that shuts down about half of the semi-tractor rigs that were able to move those containers from the ports to warehouses. In other words, distribute the containers throughout the country where they're supposed to go. And the reason they shut it down is because they said it was ruining California's air quality. And so now the trucks cannot be older than 3 years old. So the truck would have had to been made in 2017 or later. That has absolutely taken half the trucks out of the fleet that were available to move cargo around. And that is actually the biggest driver, according to our sources, of the supply chain issues that you're seeing. Now, there are other issues there. We talked about the just-in-time delivery. The whole setup of the supply chain makes it subject to failure, because if anything goes wrong at any point, it fails. But the containers are there. First of all, there's hundreds of thousands of them on ships around the ports waiting to be unloaded. But the reason they're not being unloaded is they don't have any place to put the containers because they don't have enough trucks to move the containers out of the ports. So that's really the problem, according to our sources, with the supply chain. There are others, but it is not COVID, right? It's not the standard excuse for everything. COVID, everything had to shut down during COVID, and now we have supply chain issues. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.